Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two terrific poets, Jim Daniels and David Baker, with us today. Jim will read first, and then David. Jim Daniels' newest poetry collections include Ars Poetica Chemistra, WPA Press, Comment Card, Carnegie Mellon University Press, The Human Engine at Dawn, Wolfson Press, and Gunshy, Wayne State University Press. His first book of nonfiction, Ignorance of Trees, is forthcoming from Corners Stone Press later this year. A native of Detroit, he currently lives in Pittsburgh. Here's a brilliant poet, Jim Daniels.
Thank you, Harry. I'm going to read, these are all prose poems, and this first one is set in Pittsburgh. And since I know where you're all at, I thought it might be an interesting poem to read. So it's based on watching somebody walk off stage in the middle of a play and not come back, which I hope never to see again. It was very dramatic. And it's this theater company that cites specifics, so every play is in a new location. So the epigraph explains this. And it seemed like the epigraph took on new meaning as a result of what happened. It's called Dramatic Exit. Productions are staged environmentally in places that aren't theaters. Their artists mine all kinds of non-traditional spaces for the sensory possibilities they offer when combined with creative design. We find it meaningful to place the audience and performers together, the moving parts inside the works. Early November, in this last misplaced blast of summer, I'm riding my bike through Hazelwood Green, where an old steel mill is being transformed into something sustainable, acre by acre, all 178 of them. I'll turn my clock back next week, and somewhere she will turn hers back too, but not all the way to July. No way to rewind and erase our rash acts, and who am I to say she'd want to? I'm searching for her here, knowing she is not. Across this bare, scrubby field, the chill of her absence blows freely. Unable to pass this spot ever again without seeing her turn and run, the beautiful young woman playing Anya in the cherry orchard, outdoors on the brownfield turned theater. At intermission, she walked into the stage lights and shouted that no one should have to take such abuse, then something in Portuguese, then "I love you," and then fled across the open field into the night. The edges of the stage blurred in the first act, but she went beyond those edges into disappearance. Part of the performance? In black halter and tights, sleek and slight, both diminished and bold, without the costume dress, the laced boots. Someone ran after her, then returned alone. The audience suspended in small talk, vulnerable ourselves in the half-light, unsure of our role. Was she mad or was she mad? What would happen to the family estate now? Any hope for saving it in that endless pause? Some invisible someone announced that the show could not go on, and we shrugged into a collective collapsed umbrella, cut adrift, out to sea, drifting off into the dark. I can't say what anyone else was searching for beyond their cars parked on a distant street, even now in this pale daylight. No bringing her back from that terrified darkness where we have all found ourselves, turning our back on one thing, pulled by the moon's spotlight to the black alternative in front of us. But oh, remember that night, wind in our faces, whispering its uncertain consolation, and how we took it and kept on running. How often did we not run, adjusting our costumes, going back on, coughing out the little piece of our soul we could have used later? Today, I'm looking for the ghost of the moon, but see only the sun laying bare the fields after the axe cut down all the trees while we were not there to witness. And this next poem um, is kind of a riff on music. It's I don't know if you know the song or not, but the title of the poem is called "With Apology to the Tom Tom Club," which was a kind of spin-off after the Talking Heads broke up. And the epigraph says, "The Genius of Love was the only major hit song by the Tom Tom Club." Do you ever feel like you're the genius of love? Walking, absolutely not the word for what you're doing. Down the sidewalk, across the crosswalk. I mean, cross strut, talking in tongues like a half-wit, one-hit wonder. We can go our whole lives without finding a recognizable groove. And if you are not the genius of love, perhaps you can be the idiot savant of love for having stumbled into a cosmic hip sway, the deep surge of the universe, the comet of your silly grin, perhaps due to the unforecast weather of eye contact with 10 people in a row, including two ecstatic babies in strollers and a wheelchair-bound friend waiting for another friend in her wheelchair, and they joke about racing, and you are almost apologetic until they are out of sight. Then you bust the move again, shouting aloud beneath the caressing cathedral of lush green trees in the park. Where did that come from? And oh, the genius shrug of wind through branches. Those little moments where you kind of step out of your body in some way. This next one is called Designated Driver. And I think it's true in my family, and I think it's true in some other families that, uh, particularly in larger families, you get to be known as a go-to person for one thing or another. Oh, you're having a problem with this, you should talk to Uncle Jim or your cousin Mark or whatever. In my family, I'm kind of the person that people are sent to when they're having a problem with some kind of substance abuse. And so I wrote this poem called Designated Driver. I was working on some writing when my nephew called to ask my advice on whether he should try smoking pot again. He's taking a poll. His therapist, his AA sponsor, and various members of the Brotherhood, and I am the family source on fire extinguishers, so I'm mumbling and stumbling, improvising poorly through the rapids on the stream, since I have considered smoking pot again myself while taking a similar menu of drugs for anxiety and depression that kind of work, but not quite really. And outside, the wind is shaking the big tree across the street into a wobbly mess despite its steep roots. And if we keep talking, he might convince me to light one up myself. And I'm checking the weather here in Pittsburgh and back in Detroit, and it's 84 degrees here, but feels like 86, and 85 there in Detroit and feels like 84. So we're almost in sync, though. I don't like the looks of that thundercloud icon, and we've talked for about an hour until falling into the silence of my nervous laugh. And it's like that when you're alone and been there and done that. And it wouldn't take much to stumble into the weeds and get lost in the drug of being lost again. And the soothing wind through trees blocking all sky. And he tells me his kids were putting on a play about their parents. And in one part, they're supposed to laugh like their father, but they don't know what their father's laugh sounds like. And I remember my daughter once said while we were sledding that she wished I used my sledding laugh more. Oh, the storm is on its way every day, blowing us off the high wire, and we catch it with our hands on our way down or not, but either way we tire and fall with a smile on our face or not. So I hang up ashamed of not knowing what to say as an expert on shame, though I do tell him I love him, which is a little joke between us. And I hear half a laugh, but I am half his godfather, so maybe that works out. And it's not like he's taking a vote on whether he should try getting high to chill him out while still not drinking, though he kind of is. And I'm still talking to myself about the weather while he steps back inside his small house to his wife and three kids. And I forgot what I was revising, or maybe I deleted everything except my imperfect life. And this next one is kind of an elegy for my mother who died during COVID. And um, it's called Thoughts on the Oscars, Killing It. As you'll see in the poem, but just to set it up, particularly there was an era where there weren't a lot of female comedians, and they were kind of lumped together and stereotyped in one way or another. But my mother had a real attraction to them that I'm trying to explore here while she's dying. Thoughts on the Oscars killing it. Wind gusts towards my mother dying 309 miles away in Detroit. Hope it dies down before I make the final flat drive across Ohio where nothing can stop it. If my mother was out in this, she'd be a ragged, hysterical kite. Just last week, she knocked out a tooth jerking away from the nurse forcing her to swallow pills. The Oscars are on tonight. Red carpet's already started. My mother used to love Joan Rivers, any female comic, all two of them, Joan and Phyllis Stiller. They both had work done. Blind now, my mother never walked or flew on a red carpet. She promised God she wouldn't kill herself. Didn't Jesus commit suicide? I found 3 rosaries under her bed. She stopped falling because she never gets up. Why, she wants to know, should I? The audience is stumped. Her current role is a tour de force. No one even recognizes the sweet, generous woman she once was, nurse, mother, caregiver. What a transformation. 5 stars. That's the most, isn't it? Or 4. She's done her last crossword puzzle over the phone. She's listened to her last book on tape. Last year, I made it all the way to Best Supporting Actor, then fell asleep. This wind, can she hear it? She was a big Tonight Show fan when Joan hosted. My mother was always up, beer and cigarettes, in her bright, wild muumuu on the couch, zany housewife, cackling. No one could swirl a cigarette in the air like my mother. It killed her to quit, it's killing her now. Magisterial with that cigarette, ash reckless in her wake. She's a bare, skinny tree now, rootless. My parents never went to movies. 5 kids at home, fantasy, a dark, quiet room. No need for the big screen. And yet she followed tabloids for their steamrolling scandals, ugly photos of beautiful people. My mother had the squawking laugh of Joan and Phyllis. She never had work done due to lack of funding. She did have her eyebrows tattooed on since she couldn't draw them blind. Last time I was home, she leaned into me on the couch until I draped my arm around her. Kill me, she said. They're playing the music, and she's ready and willing to walk off without accepting a thing. No statuette or stranger's arm. She's taken the hint, but nobody's letting her off stage. The wind squall, incredible today. If she could only cup her hands around it and light up one more time. And this next one kind of goes towards the more surreal side of the prose poem, which I'm reading from Ars Poetica Chemistrica, which is all prose poems. But this poem is called The Sleep Bus. It's for all the insomniacs out there. Excuse me. And I'm kind of imagining that there would be a bus that would show up that would take us into sleep. We're just waiting for it to arrive. Sleep bus. A group of us were waiting for the sleep bus. A scruffy, rumpled bunch of humanity sprawled on a series of theoretical benches in a graffitied shelter under the somber buzzing of a pale orange streetlight. Were we waiting for one bus or a series of buses? Could any single bus hold us all? Maybe a caterpillar-like accordion bus. Occasionally, someone stuck their head out, stretched their neck, and looked one way, then the other. Were we on the wrong side of the street for the sleep bus? The wrong side of the sleep for the street bus? Were we on the right street, in the right city, in the correct state or country, universe or galaxy? Is anybody hungry? I asked. I stood and stretched. Are you going someplace? Somebody asked. I can't speak for us all, but someone said. Then don't, someone else said. Is there anything in the fridge? Someone asked. The fridge, too, was theoretical, on a parallel level. A dumpster full of discarded pillows loomed behind the shelter. Something beeped in someone's pockets. I hope that's not an alarm clock, someone said. The groaning among us resembled snoring. Remember snoring? Someone asked. I was tempted to mention sleep, but I held my hungry tongue. I spun on the empty pool that once held a bus schedule. Did everyone have their bus pass? Someone asked. What's a bus pass? Someone asked. It's a kind of pill, someone said. Someone took my seat on the bench. I pressed my face against the plexiglass. The graffiti scrawled in an alien language. I felt the trembling in my feet that I thought just might be the rumbling of a bus approaching, but it was just the faint remnant of the last dream I had. Maybe the driver's lost, I said. I reached up and pulled an imaginary emergency cord. The street light went out. And I will stop there because I'm really looking forward to hearing my old friend David Baker read.
Well, thank you, Jim, for such an imaginative, beautiful reading. You see so much. Your poem about your mom just really touched me deeply. And the first one you read, let us in a little bit more about the way you work as a poet. You deal with the ordinary, but you see the extraordinary in it, and then your narrative strength is great, and your language and the way you uh, put your use of metaphor. It just so it's just so extensive, and the use, the way to work in terms of looking at common things and seeing the luminosity in them goes all the way back to Horace, as you know. But just tell us a little bit about how you approach a film or a poem and how you go through it. It could be any one of the poems you read, maybe the poem about your mother. I know that's it's pretty evident what you're talking about in there, but that really, I love my mom, and I've written some great poems, or I should say good poems about my mom, but just tell us a little bit about that, if you would, please.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the loss of a parent, no matter what your age, is a huge thing. And I think, I was trying to remember my mom and my mother in good times, and to try and capture kind of what we were losing, because I'd been kind of writing these really depressing poems just about the state that she was in at the end of her life, and so for me, the kind of impetus for that poem, in terms of the two kind of forces rubbing together, was remembering her as this lively, vibrant person who had a great, sense of humor and laugh, as opposed to the person that she was, diminished. I mean, she couldn't walk. She was legally blind, and the quality of her life, and just trying to connect it to that laugh, and to find that laugh somewhere, to kind of celebrate to celebrate what our memories of her in a way. I think when you're writing about, a parent, or, anyone you've known all your life, there's a tendency to try and, I often fall into it myself. It's just getting sentimental about it in a way that doesn't transfer to the reader. And in that poem, I was trying to use this connection to these comedians that she identified with as a kind of a more universal element. That, hey, you didn't know my mother, but maybe you saw Joan Rivers or Phyllis Diller on TV, and you know what I'm kind of talking about there. So I was conscious of trying to let the reader into that to the very private world. I mean, if if I just say, well, I love my mother, that doesn't isn't going to make any of you love my mother, right? So there's that challenge there. So I just these prose poems, uh, I've been working on them for a while, but I finally put together a little grouping of them because they allow me to, particularly when I'm trying to write about a difficult subject for me, to just let it rip, in terms of not breaking the lines anywhere and just going down that stream and trusting that it's going to take me somewhere and and not drown me, which happens sometimes. Like, where the hell am I going with this? But anyway, I hope that gives you some idea about some of the thinking behind that poem and what I was trying to do anyway.
Well, you do celebrate and you do transcend, you do transcend, as you said, you don't want just to be simple, I love you, mother, and all that, and the sentimentality, and you really make things alive. And I mean, you really have such a great memory, but you also have a great sense of invention, how you hook things up and the similes you use sometimes, not necessarily in that particular poem, but uh, I just love your poetry. I know I probably should say more specifically than that, but it's just, we're here on this earth and we do see things and then we do have that memory and yet we do want to transcend it and celebrate. And that's what language does, celebrate the humanity that we have experienced. And, your family, and some of your other poems that I've read in the past, a poem about your a pair of work boots, for example, or a poem about you and your sister brushing your teeth, together, and just the humanity. So thank you for that. And what would you like to tell us today about what you think is important right now in terms of reading or writing poetry?
Gee, I mean, I think we're challenged by our times. And that's the big cloud over us right now in terms of moving forward and trying to live our best lives in difficult times in various ways. And I think writing things down is a kind of solace, no matter what's happening. And actually, I started going way back. I started writing poetry because I went to remedial speech class from kindergarten through eighth grade. I finally graduated from speech class in eighth grade. So for whatever reason, I had problems, pronouncing certain sounds and everything. And that's what kind of led me to begin writing things down, because that way back then, because it offered a kind of solace. Because kids, they tease each other for every little thing, and of course I was a real mark because anyone could just kind of imitate my speech, and that would uh, that would
Well,
shut me up pretty quick. But I could go home and write about
well, you talk about a remedial class. I'm the smart kid in the dumb row.
it.
But you're always so great, and I always look forward. You've read a couple of times on here, and I just love your approach to poetry and the execution and the way you do it, and you do it with such grace, and you lift us all up with your writing. So, I mean, just in terms of the times we're going through, you know, I I'll just say this right here that none of us are disposable and that we all need to protect each other with love, and this is a difficult time. And I try to stay away from what's going on outside the world when we do the poetry show because it's a time to take a break and to, as you said, it is a sanctuary and we do find solace here and we do lift each other up with poetry. And I do believe that it's great to get that poetic rhythm out into a prosaic society and also putting clarity out into the world, good usage and true usage of language. And you do that. And all right, so you still teaching right now?
Oh, so I just talking with David. So yeah, I retired from Carnegie Mellon University after 40 years. Figured that's a nice round number to get out on. But I am teaching in what they call a low residency MFA program. It's for people who can't go back to school full time for one reason or another. And it's like 2 10-day residencies per year, and the rest you do in correspondence over email and stuff. And because I never got tired of teaching, it was more the academic world that was kind of wearing me down. So I'm continuing to do what I love and work with, which is working with writers. I actually did teach in the Antioch University Los Angeles low res program for a number of years, but now my alma mater, the small liberal arts college in Michigan called Alma College. They started the program and asked me to join them, and you know, I couldn't resist because it gets me back to Michigan, where I still have a lot of family and friends 2 times a year, so that's a good deal.
Well, thank you for all your great writing poetry, and the students who study with you, they should be deeply honored to hear what you have to say and to help them, go on with their lives and to learn. And I certainly have learned a lot from you. And, one quick question, we have about a minute left. Have you found, or is there a difference between your writing when you were in Detroit? All right, you were younger then, obviously, and Pittsburgh.
Well, an interesting thing is that, and I guess it's part of why I immediately felt at home in Pittsburgh because they're similar, old. They call them Rust Belt cities, right? Detroit, it was cars, and Pittsburgh is a steel industry. So there's a kind of sensibility that I kind of connect to, and in my work, it wasn't such a jarring change. And I still come back to Detroit. People say you haven't lived there in a long time, but that's kind of where the writer Richard Price said, where you're from is like the zip code of your heart. And so my zip code is still the Detroit zip code. So I still keep writing about it.
Well, thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to thank you for having me on again, Harry. It's
I
always
love
a
your
pleasure.
poetry, and it's always great to listen to you. I learn from you, and that's one thing that keeps me alive. I'm 84, and doing this poetry show just really lifts me up, as you have right now. And also, I like to keep learning.
Oh yeah.
I like to keep learning. I've probably read more books of poetry in the last over 5 years I've been doing the show than I did since I was a college student. And obviously there you read more than poetry. But thank you once again for just a magnificent reading, Jim Daniels.
Thank you, Harry.
Our next poet is David Baker. David Baker is a poet, critic, editor, and educator who has lived in Central Ohio since 1983. His 20 books include the poetry volumes Whale Fall 2022, Swift New and Selected Poems 2019, as well as the forthcoming Transit, all from W. W. Norton. Baker's awards include those from the Guggenheim NEA Mellon Foundation. His poems and essays appear in The Atlantic, The Nation, The New Yorker, and many more. He was recently included in the landmark anthology, A Century of Poetry in The New Yorker. He served for many years as poetry editor of the Kenyon Review. I have always loved John Crow Ransom, one of your predecessors. Here's a magnificent poet, David Baker.
Thank you, Harry. I would just be happy sitting here for another half an hour listening to you and Jim. I learned so much about poems, but also so much about the life lived and how small a thread it is between the life lived and the work done. I would like to hear you guys keep talking, but I'm grateful to be invited to your community and to this series. So I will read some things, and we'll say what a pleasure it is to read with Jim. I told him before we actually started recording, I went back through my bookshelves and dug out, I have a half a shelf of Jim Daniels books, but right, found his very first book that he autographed to me, I don't know when, in the other century. I've been a fan and a friend of Jim's for a long time. So I will read some poems here, and I will start with a new poem. I have a book coming out in January, as Harry said, called Transit, but this is an even newer poem. I don't know whether I've read it anywhere. It is a poem in praise, essentially, of retirement. And I think quite a bit of your community is made of retired people. Um, when I retired fully, I taught for a little over 40 years too, just like Jim, and I stopped teaching not because I didn't want to spend time with the students, but because I had just gotten tired of the increasing bureaucracy of higher education. My partner Paige and I immediately went to the island of St. John, where we go to write and walk and study and think. Um, my retirement gift to myself was cataract surgery. It seems sort of hilarious, but that shows up in this poem. This is a poem called Emeriti, which is my rank now, but it's also a surprise name for something that shows up in this poem. You'll see. Emeriti. What did you see then? You on ahead at the swash? Tangle of mangrove along the salt pond side, blight of sea grape to our right, running to the shore beyond. We thought we lived in a peaceful place. I had turned to watch two green mallards paddle there on the pond, turned rancid and brown, and had to grab a handrail to steady myself. I was a week out with my new lenses, retirement eyes. It's not what you think. The far, wading night heron, the crooked boardwalk, these were clear. But a few feet away, the sand, the crushed pebbles wavered and blurred. Then there you were. Sand crabs, you whispered, thousands just hatched. The rancor, the deceit, the faces of fascists passing as reasonable people, what we went home to. Emerita, the sand crabs, slipping into burrows no bigger than BBs. Porticensis, said our book, who live simply on plankton and detritus in the low swash. Greed or goodness, the sudden rush. I need to see the world for what it is. So I guess I'm thinking about one of the questions or one of the things you were talking about, Harry, with Jim and the times we live in, which are difficult and in some ways brutal. I tend not to be a poet who declares political assertions easily, but I think if poetry cannot raise alarms, then it's just wallpaper. That sometimes we have to name the names. Sometimes we have to make our art and our definition of beauty inclusive of the kinds of things that are happening now. So here's another poem. This is the first poem in my forthcoming book. It's a poem called Six Notes that partly takes place in that island again, St. John, but it starts here in central Ohio in a creek bed where I walk often, but you'll see what I mean again. 6 notes. Come down to us. Come down with your song, little wren. The world is in pieces. We must not say so. In the dark hours, in the nearest branches, I hear you thrum. The deer come to die beside the creek. Mud, the color of walnut stain, reek and runoff from the new development there beyond the woods. Rib and skull, no jawbone, it makes a soundless scream. I hope for peace when I walk here sometimes in the dark. If not peace, clarity. If not clarity, at least a place to breathe. Else I'll scream too. Come down, little dove, far above the bay. I hear you in a thirsty palm, or up beyond the rocks, a windy reed of song. Blue sun, blue cloud above the sweeping bay. Sometimes we have to say so. I don't know how. A man, a boy, an anger with no tongue, took his automatic rifle to school today. The report we hear, discharge, echo, is the sound of sorrow, reloading. No matter where we walk, we hear it call. Little wing, little creek, little bay, dark hour. Come down with your beaks of mourning and blood. I think if I am anything, I'm probably a poet who writes about the natural world more than anything else, a nature poet. But as I said, that can't be all that I do. And that social, political, cultural world is nature too. I have been going out into the field, as the environmental scientists say, with some of my science buddies over the last few years, conducting field work and watching them do their work and helping them do their work and listening to the language and watching the tactics of, the tree people and the water people, as they call themselves, and the rock people. Here's a little poem. This is a prose poem. I'm going to read this one because Jim was reading those beautiful prose poems. I don't write many prose poems. I don't even know quite for sure what they are, but this is apparently one of them. This is called Late Georgic in a Field in Ohio. Um, so, Harry, you were talking about Horace. I think you mentioned Horace. Um, Horace wrote Georgics sometimes. So did Virgil. So did Hesiod. Georgic is a nature poem that teaches you how to do something. It's an instructive poem. And this is a little poem about going out with one of my um, science friends. Take my hand, she said, and I lay my palm on top of her hand, and she knelt a little. I knelt beside her, and she waved gently as with a wand the small light she held like a pencil, tracing in the humming air a phosphorescent J. We were in clover. We were in Jemson in the field. We were in sedge grasses wet with the birthing of mid-evening. I have been a biologist all my life, she said, and I love this more than anything. J in the deep blue air. J, J. and the red-winged blackbirds chipped from the cattails around the pond, and a jet glided homebound or outbound in the low horizon. Jay, she wrote, we wrote, and then a blink answered from its cave of curled grasses, and another came toward us in a funny sort of dancing rise and fall, and I realized we were speaking, all of us. Firefly, an awkward human couple, not a couple. And the wonder was not that they answered us. The wonder was it dawned on us finally to ask. So I'm going to go way back now and read a poem that's at least 30 years old. I'm going to read an old one. Because it's almost the 4th of July, and this is the 4th of July poem. I confess I really hate the 4th of July. Sorry, I'm not particularly easygoing about those holidays that are patriotic, that are military. Um, as I'm not particularly fond of those holidays that are religious either. I tend to like the pagan holidays. Give me Halloween. Um, but my little village here in Ohio is shutting down the main drag this evening, and the carnies are going to come and all night work along our main street and set up a street fair. And the street fair will run from tomorrow through the 4th of July. And it's actually very sweet. It's like 2 blocks long. There's a Ferris wheel, there's a dunking thing, and you throw darts at the balloons. And it's really sweet. And there'll be a little parade. I kind of like this one, this particular celebration. This is a poem called Patriotics. And it is, I guess, about that impulse to feel some great big national celebratory something or other. At the same time, one feels that very tiny individual reduced um, sense of tragedy. And there's a tragedy that happened in this village in this poem. And remember one word, remember the old Greek term agape for one kind of love. Remember that for the end of the poem. Patriotics. Yesterday, a little girl got slapped to death by her daddy. Out of work, alcoholic, and estranged 2 towns downriver. America, it's hard to get your attention politely. America, the beautiful night is about to blow up, and the cop who brought the man down with a shot to the chops is shaking hands, dribbling chaw across his sweaty shirt, and pointing to cars across the poorhouse grass to park. It's the big one more time. July the 4th, our country's perfect holiday. So direct a metaphor for war, we shoot off bombs, launch rockets from Drano cans, spray the streets and neighbors' yards with the machine gun crack of fireworks, with rebel yells and beer. In short, we celebrate. It's hard to believe. But so help the soul of Thomas Paine, the entire county must be here. The acned faces of neglect, the halter tops and ties, the bellies, badges, beehives, jacked up cowboy boots. Yes, the backup singers of democracy all gathered to brighten in unambiguous delight when we attack the calm and pointless sky. With terrifying vigor, the whistle stop across the river will lob its smaller arsenal halfway back again. Some may be moved to tears. We'll clean up fast, drive home slow, and tomorrow get back to work. Those of us with jobs, convicting the others in the back rooms of our courts and malls. Yet what will be left of that one poor child? Veteran of no war but her family's own, the comfort of a welfare plot, a stock of wilting prayers, our father's dreams come true as nightmare. So the first bomb blasts and echoes through the streets and shrubs. Red, white, and blue sparks shower down. A plague of patriotic bugs. Our thousand eyeballs burn aglow like punks. America, I'd swear I don't believe in you, but here I am. And here you are, and here we stand again, agape. I'll read one more short poem here and be happy to talk with Harry or Jim and whatever. And this is a poem that is not mine. This is a poem written by a friend of mine named Stanley Plumley, another Ohio poet. I'm reading this poem because in about a month, his collected poems is going to be published by W. W. Norton. I'm the co-editor of this book. It's been a labor of love. I've worked on this book with Michael Collier for years and years and years, and the book is coming out um, in mid-August. This is just a little poem of Stanley's called Dutch Elms. If you don't know Stanley Plumley, find this book. Dutch Elm. I miss the elms, their crowns of airy dreams, as Virgil calls them, their towering cathedral branching spread into a ceiling above the lonely sidewalks of Ohio, where the first elm deaths were reported in America. I miss in particular the perspective looking down the distances of all those elm named streets disappearing into dusk. The last sun turned the stained blue of church windows. I miss standing there, letting the welcome dark make me invisible. I miss the birds starting to sleep, their talking in their songs, becoming silent. Then their silence. I even miss not standing there. And I miss a life of nothing but such moments, as if they'd never happened. And all you had to go on was their memory, and the feeling in the memory forgotten, but brought back again and again because you miss someone you loved forever. So that's Stan Plumley.
Thank you, David. Your poetry, there's empathy, there's love, there's clarity, there's concision, there's a stillness too, and a grace. And, it is a person in a place seeing particular things. And in some way, they're prayers to the here and now and what's carried forward, and also I deeply appreciate your literary camaraderie and your sagacity. You just lift us up in such a, what you make seems light in terms of its buoyancy, but it just has so much heart, so much heart in it. Uh, and as I said, clarity.
Thank you.
One thing Thomas Hardy had, aside from his use of so many different forms, was clarity. And you don't write the way he writes, but you have that clarity, which I deeply appreciate. And there's also, I don't know if I mentioned it, empathy in your poetry, and you see so much. So thank you for such a, just such a beautiful, deeply moving poetry reading. I have a couple of questions I'll ask you, and then we'll bring Jim on for all of us to talk. But when did you write your first poem?
In college, I was a musician in high school. I thought I was going to be a performing musician. I taught guitar and I played with a zillion bands. But by the time I got to college, I just couldn't see myself on the road for the rest of my life. And the guy across the hallway was taking English classes and getting credit for reading books. And I thought, well, hell, I read books. I like that. And I took a literature class and another one, and the teacher said, you should try to write these poems. And I realized that at, age of 20, 21, something like that, I set down one instrument, my guitar, and I picked up another one. But the thing you were talking about is the thing I still, more than anything else, try to achieve, and that is to make some kind of music, some kind of harmony and rhythm and counterpoint, the kinds of things we think about with music. I wonder if and how one can do those things with language. So I was in my 20s.
Yeah, I feel I saw what you're talking about, that musicality, and what attracts you to the poetry form?
The discipline. My father, who didn't go to college, was the self-trained land surveyor and map maker. And he spent his whole life working for the Missouri Highway Department, making maps. He was a really kind of brilliant mathematician. I like the numbers of things. I like the discipline and rigor of counting syllables or beats or measures. Um, and using that discipline to provide tension for what could otherwise just kind of fall apart or be a mess. Again, I realize also music is highly mathematical. Um, so I think that's something of it. Yeah,
And years ago, I said a similar thing. I said Stravinsky, we all know he's a genius in music, but he's also a genius in mathematics,
absolutely.
as you just stated. So, uh, Jim, why don't you come on if you will, please? Why don't each one of you talk about the other's poetry that he read or the reading? And we'll start with David, since he just finished reading about Jim Daniels, and then Jim about David Baker's poetry. David, please.
Sure, I've loved Jim's poems for decades. He's much older than I am. Um, so there's a lot of work to draw on. There are these fabulous ironies or counterpoints in Jim's work. The language is made out of the language of speech. It is the idiom of spoken word. It's not fanciful. It's not highfalutin. Um, and there's this kind of disguised humility there. And yet you realize how rhythmic, how artful his language and his phrasing is. He is a storyteller, but just like I was saying a minute ago, he's a storyteller who converts story into song. Um, and I was really enchanted to hear these prose poems because, as I said, I'm just not sure even what that is, that form. I know it's a paragraph or the lines aren't measured or aren't broken, but there are lines. They're limited by the shape of the page. There's a stop there, but the prose poem has this wonderful continuous momentum. And that's what he taps into in these new poems, this voice that gets in your head, um, that speaks in what James Wright called the pure, clear word. The young poets of New York come to me with their mangled figures of speech, but they have little pity for the pure, clear word, which is one of Jim's many strengths, that clarity. Of all those poems, it was the elegy for the mother that just broke me, beautifully so. You called his poems transcendent, and they are, but they are beginning and ending in this world as well, with glimpses of the other or the beyond or the contained. Um, anyway, that's some of the things I think just quickly about Jim's poems, if that helps.
Jim,
Oh, hey, David, I found something as well,
Oh my God.
which is an even older book. Was it
It
84,
is.
1984? That was your first book, wasn't it?
At 1981,
Or
my
81? Oh,
yeah,
yeah. Uh,
it may have
so,
been. They only
so
printed three of them, so I think they reprinted it in
oh,
1984.
okay. So, my point in showing that is that David and I do go back a long way, and we're more or less same generation, and so we kind of grew up together as poets. And I've always one of the things I've admired about David is his ability as a scholar too, and editor. that in terms of the stuff about form that he's written and edited, and just his work at the Kenyon. He's done a lot of good work on behalf of poetry over the years that I appreciate. And I I think we write about different places or worlds, but I do think one thing that I think we have in common is this clarity and precision and I hope and honesty. His poems, he's not playing any games in his poems, and I admire that. I mean, he's using craft, but craft in the service of having something really important to say.
Well, thank you both for just a magnificent reading. And Jennifer is going to come on in a minute. Before she comes on, I want to introduce next week's show. We have two superb poets. Nika Ray, she's the daughter of Nicholas Ray, Rebel Without a Cause, among other great films that we grew up on. And Jane LaCroix will be with us. And they're both wonderful young writers. So thank you once again, David Baker and Jim Daniels. You exalt us all with your clarity and your transformations and your transcendency and your great poetry. So thank you. And here's our great director, Jennifer Clymer.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you guys for joining us. It was wonderful. I have to agree. The only thing that made me sad was that you both didn't speak longer, that you didn't read from more.